Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming on to Latin first, priority subject. I like to start. I'll run through a quick PowerPoint. Obviously, there will be a chance at the end if you've got any questions you'd like to ask, or indeed I can remind you that there are some colleagues in the prep school that will happily answer any questions on Latin as a choice for next year. If you don't know me, I'm Miss McClure. I'm the head of Class X at the senior school. So we'll just run through some things, and as I say, if that inspires any questions, then do feel free to raise them this morning. Okay. Now, of course, by choosing at this stage, you've got 3 years to think about before GCSE exams come up in earnest. So there are 2 years where, hopefully, there are a range of books there that you're well used to already, and this course is well established in terms of the Cambridge Latin course. It fits very nicely into the year group patterns as well. So many of you will associate Caecilius, Est Pater, and all of that with Year 7. Year 8 has dealt with the Blue Book in Britain and Alexandria, and then for lower fourth, we would tend to focus on Book 3, Cambridge Latin course. And then these two very much are bridge books into the GCSE linguistic material as well. So the course itself has a nice continuity, and therefore the sort of things you've been doing so far are very much continued. So you will be used to the idea of a linguistic element being introduced in each stage. That will then be consolidated within a storyline that goes throughout the whole course. You'll also have some paralinguistic or background material just about the culture of the Romans as well in each chapter, just to take you through the whole course. Okay. Now, of course, this is going to have a range of things that you can look at, and in a similar vein. So if you think Pompeii as book 1, if you think Alexandria and Britain as book 2, you can see we sort of move around the Roman world a bit. So you've got, particularly in book 3, concentrates on the Roman settlements at Bath and at Chester. And then for books 4 and 5, it moves to the big city itself. So Rome becomes the centre for the storylines. And there are some characters old and new, so I'm afraid I don't know what I won't test you on your storylines and who's appeared in books 1 and 2, but Quintus the superhero does keep popping up all the way through the course. Salvius, who just about been introduced to, I think, briefly in book 2, is much more of a central character as the course continues and becomes something of a pantomime villain. And then we've got a few sort of stock characters, if you like. Memor is the lazy soothsayer, the person who does the sacrifices and tells the future at Bath. We have 2 buffoon soldiers who are anything but the professional soldiers you probably imagine in the Roman army, Modestus and Stritio. If you like a bit of romance, comes in book 4 or 5 with Paris and Domitia. Sneaky state spy is always around Epaphroditus. You get towards the end of the book, and sort of glowering over the last 2 books is the ominous presence of Domitian, the emperor, with all of the threats that he embodies. So a good range of stories, characters, places to look at as well, and that's all, of course, alongside the language. Now, we are talking about a GCSE course, so I certainly, it's difficult to make this slide seem interesting. This is OCR specification, jargon, whatever you want to call it, but here is the real deal. This is the official line of what they consider the aims of the GCSE course to be. So don't worry too much about your morphology and syntax and accidents and all of that sort of stuff. Essentially, they want you to know some Latin, which is heartening for a Latin GCSE. They want you then to use that linguistic ability to think about the literature and know something about the culture itself, and to be able to come up with some conclusions and some opinions based on that. So common sense in specification jargon there for you. We'll move on quickly. We do, of course, have to talk about exams as well, but we can be fairly brief about this. It is a very fair course. Certainly in terms of the national talk about GCSEs getting harder, etc. I mean, the one thing I can absolutely guarantee for you folks is that the Latin language has not changed. It is the same, and therefore what they examine you on is the same. So if you have a competence in Latin, whatever GCSE they come up with, it's going to test the same skills. They've gone 50-50, so 50% is the language, 50% is the literature, essentially. And you can see within the language, this will come of no surprise, it's what you're practicing at the moment. You'll be practicing to translate some Latin into English. You'll be practicing to get some sense out of a passage. This is the new bit. But again, this is something that you will be doing at the moment. So in other words, some grammar questions. Why is such a, what tense is such and such a verb in? How can you tell? Those sort of questions. They've added this, but the sort of whole new national curricular change. This is it in Latin, to be honest. It's an option. So there is the option that you can translate some English into Latin, but those are very easy sentences. They've said that there's a lack of any constructions. It really is know the vocab, know some of the simple endings, and you can see there's 10 marks available on that. This is the key thing. You will be learning vocabulary at the moment. There is a defined vocabulary list, which they are duty bound that any word that you have not seen on that list or cumulatively learnt in advance, if they put it in the paper, they have to give you the meaning. So there really is a bank of vocabulary that you can get to know in advance, and then it's just applying some of the linguistic principles that you've consolidated in the next 3 years. Okay. When we get on to literature, this is where it gets interesting. It really is, and we'll say a little bit more about this and why study Latin in a couple of slides' time. But you can see we've gone for 25%, and there's going to be Latin prose and Latin verse literature. So you're using your linguistic competence and skills to actually look at some of the real authors, which is one of the joys of the subject. You get to see what they thought about their own lives, what they thought about the Roman culture. And again, this is essentially, if we were talking other subjects, folks, this is pre-released material. So you know in advance what you are studying. You will have had your sort of workbook where you'll have gone through the text, and you'll know exactly what every word means. You'll have linked what agrees with whatever. You'll have your translation in here. You'll have your discussion notes that we've talked about in class. And then really it is a case of just being able to talk about the literature you've studied. You can see a bit of translation. There'll be a class translation that we'll have done in advance. Knowing what's going on, that's a hefty set of marks, folks, just for knowing what you've been studying over the last year and a half by the time you get to the exam. This analysis question, it's a bit like literary criticism, to be honest. They would give you a passage of the Latin and just say, how does the author make that vivid, exciting, something like that. And then the extended response, a whole 10 marks, would be something across the prescription. So they would say from in this case, the prose literature that you've studied, what do you think of the Roman views of this topic? And that's just pulling together, again, much of the content that you will have learned in advance. So it really is that, folks. It's translation, analysis, context, and knowing something about the style or the characterisation of the authors. Watch very carefully, see if you can spot the difference. There we go. Okay, there's the title. So verse literature is just the other 25%. Same skills, again, hopefully reassuring that all of that pre-release material is there for you just to show your mettle, really, when you get to the exam. In terms of prescribed literature, I've been on the website this morning just checking this because we are thinking 3 years ahead. So that's the sort of thing that you'd be looking at. For the prose, Germanicus and Piso, a little bit of spicy politics there, folks, in terms of, was he bumped off and assassinated or not? Was Piso guilty? Germanicus, a famous Roman general, and persona non grata, Pliny talking about some people that he doesn't like. And you can make it as there's opinion questions kicking in, you can decide whether you like them or not. And then for the verse, passions and poisons, well, there you go, there's a range of things there. And if I was to choose, 3 of my favourite, those are just heavyweights of Latin literature, folks. You have a treat in store if you opt for this and get a chance to get a GCSE, having studied some Virgil, Ovid and Catullus, some great stuff there. Which probably brings us to that question, which may be one of consideration as you traverse around the campus this morning. Why study Latin? Let me give you a few thoughts. We're all signed up to a school that has that as its tagline, and if I had been a PR man, I couldn't have thought of 3 better words for the study of Latin, in terms of flair for language, discipline just in that knowing your endings, having those that analysis to hand, and then the rigour of course using that linguistic ability to then talk about culture and history and literature as well. So it does certainly fit in with the ethos of the place. Right, can we just get past the dead language thing? I need to mention it. It is a very different skill from other languages. We're not talking a conversational language here. For any that haven't noticed, there are no ancient Romans in Bromsgrove. They don't need directions, they don't need to describe what they've done for the holiday. We're talking about something where we are using the linguistic skills as an academic discipline, just to analyse the language and then talk about it and come up with informed opinions. So no, I won't be able to tell you how to order a pint of beer in ancient Rome, but you will look at some Virgil and Ovid instead. There really is a sense of the lower fourth year is the crucial one in breaking the back of the language work. And therefore that's where you've got to do a bit of soul searching. You've started your Latin journey. You will know at what confidence level you are at the minute. I'm not saying even if you're not 100% confident at the moment, there is plenty of consolidation time. As I've said, everything you've learnt so far is not going to change. So essentially, whatever you're doing now, you have 3 more years to consolidate. And therefore, if you still can't quite rattle off your pull, you've still got 3 years to be able to get that up there. Likewise, for next year, you've got most of the linguistic work that remains is covered, and then you really have essentially got one construction to do in the upper fourth year in the last 2 of those books. So do think about the time you've invested, do think about your level of confidence at the moment, and make your informed choice as to whether you think 3 more years will help that. This is the frustrating part. You've dipped your toe in Latin, and lots of people give it up at a stage where actually it starts to get interesting. I can't help the fact that the language itself does need a fair bit of foundation work with endings and linguistic work to kick-start it. But once you have got that level of competence, you really have got an ideal opportunity to use that as source material, essentially, to look at the Romans themselves. And that really does open up the subject. Those that only dip their toe in think it's a very narrow, elitist subject. Those that do continue with it can actually see that suddenly it blossoms and you've got the breadth of the subject that you really can get interested in. I wish I didn't have to put that on there, but it's true. You are in a position where you can make an informed choice. I'm not going to pressurise anyone, but I will just say you have got an opportunity that literally millions do not. And therefore, whichever way you go, I'm hoping your presence here will show you have got an interest. But if you are going to give it up, you really need to think that is the right decision for you. I would spin it round and, to be honest, say, why would you not study it? If you started it, if you think you've got a competence in it and like some of the aspects of the subject, then why not give it a go? No one ever sort of gets a Latin GCSE and says, oh, well, that was a waste of time. Whether it's in employment later on, whether it's looking at university places, whether it is just for your own breadth of skills. Latin is a subject that is respected for genuine reasons. And there are also millions of people who say, oh, I should do a bit more of that when they get to that time. I can see some nods, which is disappointing for you, but I think makes the point within the room. It's not talking to me. There we go. Equally, you're making choices that you've got to think about your academic profile. So speaking as a house parent here, I would say you've got to make sure you've got that breadth of skills. You've got to make sure that your academic profile reflects you as an individual. And therefore, you have got a chance here that you've got something that will keep options open and that will either complement skills that you've got in other languages, other art subjects, or it will give you an interesting contrasting balance to the sciences if you see yourself ultimately being a scientist. Okay, that's the end of the slide. There we go. As I say, in prep school, if any of the pupils want to have another chat, Mr. Skerritt, Mr. Hind, Miss Simmons, friendly faces down there, they will happily fill in any more detail on anything that might have come up today. I'm aware that's 15:15, so I'm going to stick to the deadline. But if anyone does have any questions, please do feel free to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you.